event has now started. It is presented by Redmond Mag and sponsored by Pantheon. Josh, please take it away.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. My name is Josh Koenig. I'm a co-founder at Pantheon, and I'm very pleased today to be joined by Antonella Severo, who is a product manager at Nestle. And we're going to be discussing their experience and journey from WebCMS to WebOps. It's a conversation about how they've been leveraging the web as a channel internally in a large, complex, and fairly fast-moving organization over the past several years. So Antonella, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, that's great. So I thought we could start a little bit with just some background about your role and your team within Nestle. Like, how does it work? How does Nestle organize their, where do you sit in the organization? Are you in IT? Are you in marketing? And what is the team like around you?
Sure. So I'm the product manager of WebCMS, and we handle the web content management solutions for our brand websites across the globe. And we also handle our hosting platforms, user optimization tools, and we sit in the MarTech group, Marketing Technologies, which sits in Marketing, Sales, and E-Business group, which is one of the streams in IT. And we have various stakeholders. For example, we have a group marketing function, which provides the business requirements, and we find the technical solutions. We work with security to make sure we're meeting security requirements. Our stakeholders are the markets and businesses, but also our stakeholders are agencies because they're the ones using our tools.
That's fascinating. So you actually really think of it, you're a product manager, you're thinking about CMS as a product for the organization writ large.
Exactly. And we have developed our own, let's say, customizations on top of it. And that's the product development that we do.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And just your team, like, well, who do you, like, who's your day-to-day
Sure,
collaborators and peers?
I manage a team of about 10 people and growing, and we have solution architects, tech specialists, business analysts, project managers on the team.
Great, cool. Well, let's set the stage for this story. And now, going back a little bit, now there was a point in time, and maybe it was in before your time at Nestle, maybe 10 years ago or so, I think, when there was a decision to adopt an open source content management system, Drupal specifically, as something to really standardize the company on. Can you, even if it's a little bit of history, could you maybe explain what it was like before that decision was made and how that happened?
Yeah, you're right. I was at Nestle 6 years ago, and I think a few years before that, just in IT in general, there was a push to journey to cloud or to standardize the solution. So in my area specifically, you can imagine Nestle has over 2,000 brands. And so if all of those brands have their own websites, there was not much centralization. In some areas, yes, but mostly it was decentralized. So you had hundreds of CMSs, hand-built sites, many hosting platforms. And so it was difficult to really govern the security. You can imagine the amount of training and knowledge bases that had to be created. It really wasn't an efficient system. And it was clear that we had to, along with the simplify, standardize, and share philosophy of Nestle at that point, we had to select one unified compliance CMS. And of course, we as you mentioned, we chose Drupal because it's open source, it's enterprise level, highly scalable. There was a strong community of talent behind it that we could tap into, and multilingual, multi-site. There's so many reasons why we went for Drupal.
Yeah, that's it makes a lot of sense. And then in terms of, 2,000 brands. You're also, the company is growing, right? It grows by acquiring new brands. That's one of the ways. And so you have to have something you can bring, new members of the Nestle family, so to speak, into.
Exactly.
And yeah, open source flexibility, and the ability to really drive innovation where you want. Talk to me a little bit about what happened within the organization as part of that, because this was part of a bigger digital transformation effort, right?
Correct. So what's really important is that reusability is important. So we actually, when we first started off with Drupal, we did implement some sort of standardization using a master approach. So we would have one unique code base, and then you could spin off child sites from that. You set up some sort of governance process for that business. And a master approach could be a global brand, a business, a regional area, a category. So we started off with 3 masters. Then we, a year later, we had 9, and we're up to 35 masters. At the beginning, though, it was great because we had Drupal standardization, we had the masters, so you had some sort of governance and sharing. But we quickly discovered that nonetheless, all of these different businesses began operating in their own silos. So we quickly started to branch off. So we realized that beyond Drupal, we had to create another level of connectivity among the different businesses and us as a centralized area. And that's why we chose to develop our distribution on Drupal, which is called Lightness. And this contains front-end components, security configurations, integrations with our other solutions at Nestle, because I have a lot of sister teams working on their areas, and CRM, e-retailing, things like that, analytics. So this started to bring us closer together into a more connected ecosystem, I would say.
That's fascinating. So sort of the step 1 was selecting the open source CMS Drupal, and you had this ability to sort of deploy it in a kind of shareable format, and you started with 1, got to 3, now to 35. But even beyond that, sort of the natural forces of the business were leading people to kind of go also, but still go it alone a bit more. I suppose because they had some business requirements that said we need to do it that way. And so then they're just starting, if they just start with vanilla Drupal, there's a lot of decisions that get made thereafter that could lead you into, again, a kind of a difficult to govern scenario.
Yeah, I mean, you could use an analogy of Lego pieces. So Drupal has over 35,000 modules, right? So there might be some overlap with them, but if each business and their global agency is working on selecting the modules they think, there's no kind of sharing among the different businesses. So what we do with Lightness is we do a pre-selection of those modules of what we think is best, is the most secure, and then we send Lightness off to them. And what we're hoping to achieve is that some efficiencies, so that we're developing or providing as much of a starter kit to these different businesses, so they can take that development money and focus it more on the marketing features that really will bring value to their customers.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you're building, sort of just building up the foundation higher, so that when someone in a particular market or a particular product, or for just a particular campaign, they have their own budget, they have things they want to achieve, they're really focusing, no longer on these low-level foundational things in the CMS, but actually,
exactly,
well, what am I going to do that's going to really move the needle in the market?
Exactly. And this covered it well for our master businesses, but we still had a lot of independent single sites, right, that we were dealing with. So especially they don't have a huge budget, so we want to make it introduce cost savings there as much as possible, and also always looking to accelerate to market as fast as possible.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, like, you have your partners in marketing, and it's always like the campaign's launching tomorrow. Like, where's the website?
Exactly.
Well, I was going to ask on the technical front. Just you mentioned some common integrations in CRM. Like, I'm always fascinated with sort of what are these big kind of hub technologies that you're looking to kind of link up to globally and standardize around.
Yeah, I mean, we are a food company, so we obviously have a recipe hub. We have products we sell, so we have a product data hub. We have a content hub, which is our kind of digital asset management. A big push that we did was SEO. So we standardized the SEO and we added data layers. So this data will feed into our global analytics dashboards. What else? Buy now buttons. Yeah, there's more, I'm sure. So
that's great. So then tell me, this is about the time whereabouts where Pantheon enters a story and WebOps enters the story. From your perspective, like, what's the difference between WebOps and WebCMS?
Yeah, so like you said, I mean, this is a journey. So we began with looking at the CMS, but that's an application level. But of course, well, where do you put the CMS? You have to have it on sturdy and stable hosting platforms. And actually, we had like an infrastructure as a service for a single sites, for example, just to share some of the challenges we had. And these were very difficult for our markets and their agencies to learn how to do. I mean, it's one thing when you're an agency and you're working independently, you have all control. But when you're working with an enterprise and there's so many requirements and processes, you have to kind of get up to speed and hook into the system. And our job is to make it as easy as possible. And so one of the things that Pantheon offered as a platform as a service, the system kind of makes the operations of getting a site installed, getting all the configurations done much easier and faster, and offers a support system. Because a few years ago, we were like 2 or 3 tech specialists. It was just impossible to handle, like, how do you install this? How do you do that? How do you get this hosted? It's just not scalable. And that's one thing that what we're trying to do with web operations is look at all the areas that we can automate, that we can reduce the manual tasks. So what are these systems? And that's an important thing for governance, training, knowledge sharing.
Yeah, that's something I hear a lot when talking to customers, and you're talking about like kind of those different layers. Infrastructure as a service is obviously very useful. Everybody loves to be able to like get infrastructure on demand in the cloud, but that doesn't really solve your challenge, because that's a rather raw material. And being able to adopt a platform, if you have a platform as a service, that helps you. And then from the perspective of your stakeholders, it's almost like you're delivering SaaS to them, because the WebCMS is just there. It's just available when they need it on demand.
Exactly. And, with Pantheon, we're able to deliver Lightnest already pre-installed. So then they can just take it, work on the application, and take it from there.
Yeah, right. And so you can use this distribution, in our parlance, what we call it, use it as an upstream, deploy new sites whenever needed. And then you're able also to then manage updates of your own to the global state after those sites are created.
Yeah. So talking about like the governance, I mean, there's always like a challenge at every step of the way that we try to standardize. So once we did get Lightnest out there, and new sites added Lightnest, they would just add Lightnest once and then forget about it. So again, they started to branch off. So, this is why it's important to have this community and to have these processes and systems where the agencies understand, the business understand, every time there's a Lightnest release, which we do every 2 months, you have to update, because it's got security, it's got the updates to our integrations, etc. And this is the community that we've built over the years. And now we're also getting into DevOps and pipelines, and that's especially important because that's really helping us to be more agile and accelerate.
Yeah, that's great. So let me, if we go back on the story, started with Drupal, got to a sort of the master approach where you could just give people sites off of one code base, or then 3, then 35. Then singleton Drupal instances start to pop up because there's the business need, but they're kind of Wild West with like the whole 3,000 Legos that they could put together any way they like. Then you get to Lightnest, which is huge upgrade. But then they're still kind of operating in that singleton way. So they start with Lightnest, but then they're off on their own journey, and it's very difficult to keep up with them. And Pantheon being the connective tissue between that central development of the distribution and the business stakeholders that want to be able to go their own way without having to sever the connection with where they started.
Exactly, exactly. And another important piece that we had to also do is make sure that the code got into our own Git repositories. And then we created this kind of open source lightness community where you can just pick up lightness if you wanted to, but right now, well, at the beginning, but now it's pre-installed. But you can also not only extend the modules in your own master or application, but you can begin to extend them in a like responsible way, you know, using certain code that's generic, and contribute it back to lightness. Because if there's something that's identified that is not only a value to your business that you're changing, but can also be valuable to lightness and other markets, that's the concept of reuse and share. So we've gotten to a point where that's beginning to happen.
Oh, that's great. So you're getting, you've established, using WebOps to establish that connection and that governance model between the edge and the center, lets the edge people run as fast as they need to. We'll still be able to get the updates. But now you're also seeing contributions coming back from the edge to the center.
Exactly, exactly.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I mean, so we're talking a lot about technology, but how has this affected the business? Like what has this done for you as an organization, do you think?
Well, it's helped. One of the most important things is that it's helping to keep the sites more secure, and hopefully the scans will take less time because we've already made it as secure as possible if you're using the lightness base. The whole governance, I mean, although it takes some time to get used to it and set it up, once it's going, I mean, you can get 65 sites up in a matter of months if you have all your content ready to go. Another thing that we're also trying to do is deal with all these single sites that is expensive to run. So what we actually created recently is a site builder tool. So what we do is you create your brand profile, and then you can spin up a site, and there might be even pre-configured page templates. So you can spin up a site in 30 minutes. Of course, then you have to get your content on. And what we do is we created a master just for these sites, which we hosted on Pantheon. And this has really accelerated. I mean, we've had an instance where somebody came to us like, I need a site now for this campaign. It was only a few pages, but we were able to, in a matter of 48 hours, get a site up to accommodate this campaign.
That's great.
So,
that's great.
Yeah. So I think the technology is there, the operations is there. It's just a matter of getting the content and images ready, and that's in the hands of the marketers, but everything else is there and ready for them to go.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You love to hear stories where often that dynamic between marketing IT is one of like, it's, we need this now. No, you can't have it, or that'll take 3 months or whatever. And there's that friction that's there. But when you can turn into, responsibly turn into a department of yes, that really can set a new tone in that relationship, which just leads to much greater partnership and collaboration and ultimately productivity for the business.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, go on.
Yeah, I mean, on that note of what you were saying is, in the beginning, we were very much more involved, and actually we had 2 or 3 tech specialists who were executing the operations, because we were also learning about what are these tools, what are the processes that we need, tweaking it along as we go, helping the then masters understand the processes. And we've evolved it to a point, because at some point we become a bottleneck. With 35 masters, it's impossible to do. So the goal was always to enable the businesses and markets to take it as far as they can independently, with the proper guidelines and processes, but that we're only there as consultation, and we're there to focus on automation, new features. So that has also evolved in the last 6 years.
Yeah. That, like you said, nobody wants to be a bottleneck, and I've talked with many customers where they have their teams in IT specialists literally having to manage the content because while there is a CMS, it's so arcane and complicated and old and kludgy, that this is probably a little bit where you were before even standardizing on Drupal. But being able to just put autonomy in the hands of the individual markets and the brands, the more you can do that, then that's what they want, right?
Yeah. And I used to work for an agency, a Drupal agency, and I just remember working on a project, doing everything, and then we had to stop for a few days because the platform wasn't ready or something. We had to wait for central team at the client to get something done. And for us, our productivity goes down because you have resources set up for a full week on a particular project. So I can imagine also for agencies who are there day to day, this is a vast improvement.
Yeah. I was wanted to get back and touch on that a little bit, because you mentioned before, again, there's like you're striking this balance of governance where you're centralizing the right things and maintaining connections, but at the sort of edge instances, those are brands and markets. They're working with local teams. Like what's your philosophy in approaching, how to work with those sort of external or remote teams?
Sure. First of all, we have a panel of suppliers who are global agencies. So these are the ones that we mostly work with and have a strong connection. We have quarterly reviews with them. We have webinars. We have onboardings with them. And I mean, this is a great question, because what would happen is we had an onboarding, and then we realized that as new teams are added to these agencies or there's a rotation, they start to lose the knowledge of working with Nestle. So we're actually having to kind of redefine how that's done to ensure that anybody who's working on a Nestle project understands the full scope of it. And so we've started like Q&A sessions once a week. So agencies could come on, ask us questions, not only the global, but also the local agencies, which we have much less connection with. We have a database, we have a knowledge base. So we've created our own Drupal site, which we call Vitrine, that has a lot of information, how-tos, but that also is difficult. So we just started, we've been working on for the last year, an academy. So we're using the Opinio distribution to create kind of lessons that agency members could come in and understand Nestle's ecosystem and specific things they need to know and get certified at the end. So our hope is that anybody working on a project has a much more deeper understanding of what it entails.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you're having kind of like to run your own certification process for all these folks to work with you. Do you feel so? Pantheon has a really strong partner network, and we work a lot with digital agencies. They're some of our strongest proponents. Do you feel like this, the ability to adopt WebOps for some portion of your portfolio, has it helped with collaborating with those agencies?
Yeah, in order to standardize the processes, it's just helped. I know that sometimes it's probably challenging at the beginning, or there's pain points. Like right now we're working with DevOps and pipelines, and that's somewhat new to some of these agencies, but it's all, like I said before, it's part of a journey, and we're all kind of learning together. So we have strong partners in our agencies. We have strong partners with Pantheon in this journey, helping us tweak our upstreams and our pipelines to get this flowing as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, working in Nestle's processes is mandatory for the agencies, but we want to ensure that we're making it as easy as possible for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would think, like, there's some things that we do somewhat uniquely, like with our multi-dev feature and the ability to collaborate online. That's usually, and if essentially you're able to say, like, that is now part of the Nestle way of doing things, the ability to have new environments and review changes ahead of time and have that all just be available in the cloud, so to speak, typically helps with workflow quite a lot.
Yeah, the multi-dev option was really great. So we could have our sandboxes and collaborative workspaces.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So I think, it's an interesting journey, like, coming a long way from just selecting the open source CMS to building it towards your distribution and figuring out how to like distribute the distribution to 2,000 brands and, many global agencies and many, many more local agencies and probably some of just regular teams who are doing it themselves. That's, quite a journey. What is still yet to come? What are you looking forward to, this year, next year, because I imagine there's still so much more to do.
Yeah. I mean, actually, just getting back to the legacy, it's really been interesting because I was just looking at some statistics yesterday. So 3 years ago, I would say 30% of our sites were on our, say, compliance systems. 2 years ago, it was 60. Last year was 90, and we're finally at 97%.
Wow.
And there's always going to be a transition. We're always acquiring new sites, so there's always going to be some time that it takes for them to join us. But new sites and new masters are, they're onboarding directly to our new system. So we're at a great place that way. And looking ahead, so like I said, our Lightness Academy is going to come up soon, I hope. We're going to be beta testing it. That's one thing we're going to roll out. Another thing that we've been doing accessibility sort of on lightness level, but now we're going to distribute it at scale. So we're in the process of identifying a partner tool to do that and ensuring that all our sites are accessible, because especially it's important to do for many reasons. It's also becoming a legal requirement in areas. So we want to make sure that we can get ahead of that and have that tool ready for our markets. And we're also just starting to think about an idea of a web operations portal. Like I said, for example, in order to onboard a new agency or a new project, you have to get accesses to so many different ways. Well, what if there's a way you just click on one button, fill out one form, and that form triggers the forms for all the other processes? So that's kind of what this web portal would do. It would house all the different things that an agency or business has to do to onboard and run their websites. So those are the two biggest things, as well as really evolve in our DevSecOps area.
Yeah. Those were all seemed like very, accessibility is a huge thing, and again, like, can be really challenging when you have that. There's some amount of distributed ownership and distributed authorship within your ecosystem, and having the ability to satisfy specific stakeholder requirements without them kind of being, it's siloed again. Because a silo in an accessibility context just creates this, like, it's a big silo of risk, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially really with accessibility. Yeah, and with accessibility, you really have to be, it's transversal. You have to start at the design, from designers. So we need to do more, not just with development agencies, but with the design agencies to get them up to speed. Because the more you can do on the design level, the more you can save. Because if you're fixing those bugs later on, when you're doing the accessibility scanning, it has a higher cost. So better to kind of nip those things in from the design point of view. So we're going to be looking at design systems and things like that.
Yeah. That's something I'm very excited about. I've seen some of our customers also doing, like, again, in this model of central, but then distributed design systems can plug into that model, so that people, again, are starting with something that not only looks right, like it has the right brand and the right things, but the components are built in a way that makes them, accessibility compliant out of the box, versus, like you said, playing whack-a-mole at the last mile, trying to fix things one side at a time.
Exactly.
And then on that WebOps portal, that's super fascinating to me. So is the idea, like, do you think, is the vision to get that almost all the way to self-service for those stakeholders?
As much as we can, yes. I mean, every year we're just constantly trying to reduce those tasks. I mean, we have a lot of different racy matrices. So how can we take it from this amount to this amount, Because the more you can reduce those manual tasks, the fewer incident tickets you have, fewer errors, less confusion, less frustration, fewer pain points. Yeah.
Yeah, and that again gets back to that idea of, well, with the right platform or platforms in your case, right? You've got a lot of different technologies you're using, but with the right platform approach to your stakeholders, it can feel more and more like SaaS. Like, hey, I needed a website. Boop, I got one.
Exactly.
That's great.
Exactly.
I needed training on it. Boop, I took the training. I need to get certified. Boop, I'm certified. Like that's, and then they're just off and running. And again, not having to file tickets with your team to get their work done, which is what they want.
Exactly. Oh, and I thought of another thing that we're also focusing on is sustainability. Making sure that our websites are being sustainable. They're not using resources heavily. So how could we make sure we're looking at different ways? It's a very difficult topic to do. To find that right calculation, to show a score, for example. But we're looking into that as well. And, that's especially a big thing that we would have to look at with you. Because our sites, not only is there the application level, but there's the platform level. Where's the site hosted? How green is it, etc.
Yeah. There's the whole question around like, what are, data centers are actually massive consumers of electrical resources, and how are your data centers supported? Like, we feel really good about our partners at that level, and also then like, what's the efficiency of use within there? Because that's there's a lot of if you're maximizing your compute utilization, then that's more electricity going to useful use versus it just being consumed by the machines that are sitting partly idle.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've done some work on that in the past. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks again for joining us today, and I'm very excited to see where your WebCMS, hopefully empowered and enabled by WebOps, continues to go in the future. Antonella, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be able to share what we've been doing. Like I said, it's been an interesting journey, and looking forward to taking it further. Yeah, with your help as well. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Okay. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.